Good rainy Friday morning. Intro to A&P. We are beginning our brand new unit today on the endocrine system. This is chapter 13 in your textbook. And make sure before we get started that you have a copy of this notes page. It says unit nothing, the endocrine system study guide. It's got pictures on the front. I've added it to Plan Book and we'll post in Google Classroom. If you have a color printer at home and you like to print the colored version of these, by all means, go ahead. But if you came in on that last sad Wednesday where you all got to come in and pick up stuff after the school was closed down, you should have gotten one of these copies from me. So we're going to introduce the endocrine system today and just pretty much fill out the first page, the front, page 1 here. All right, so here's our pictures there on page number 1. And we're going to pretty much fill this whole page out here, but I'm going to break it up into 2 sections. I know there's not a ton of space here, but I'm going to write a little bit underneath these pictures and then also a little bit above these ones. So as we're filling these out, you know, make sure you keep the stuff on the bottom close to this picture. Then we get to the next one, the stuff close to here. Hopefully that makes sense to you. All right, so what's going on in these first 2 pictures? Well, naturally, I feel like we normally would start off with page 2 and say, like, here's all of the anatomy of our endocrine system. And the endocrine system is kind of easy, anatomically speaking, because it's just glands and they release hormones. And so we're going to learn the hormones that each gland secretes. And that's the gist of it. Now, what is really important for you to know is that hormones control your body much like your nervous system does. So my nervous system, my brain sends signals to my effectors, and then I can respond, usually with either releasing hormones through glands or like sweating, okay, sweat glands, for example, or have some kind of muscular movement. Okay? Are the ways that I can control things. However, your hormones have a wide range of effects where they can affect things chemically, or we oftentimes say metabolically. So how these hormones interact with your body vary greatly depending on the type. So these 2 pictures here are going to show you the 2 different types of hormones that we have. So this first picture is steroid-based hormones, and then these are going to be things that are cholesterol-based. This is just chemically describing them, or lipid, which is a type of fat. Hopefully you remember that from biology. Testosterone is an example of a steroid hormone. But there's other steroids that you might take that a doctor might prescribe, right? Sometimes if you get a sore throat or something, you might get a steroid. And it's basically a way for your body to make new proteins and repair things to your body. But whatever those hormones might be, it can vary greatly. So we'll talk about how those react. Then we have the one that's the more common type, and these are the amino acid-based hormones that you produce. So they're more like a protein instead of more like fat that's going in. But the way that they interact with my target cells, so the cells that they are destined to go affect, are different. Right? So just remember the amino acid hormones, they are more common than the steroid-based ones, but how they interact with our target cells are different. So we'll start here with the steroid hormone. So this is showing you a cell, right? So this beige piece here, this whole thing, this is a cell, and then this is the nucleus of my cell. And the outside of my cell, or my cell membrane, is represented right here, kind of that boundary between the blue, kind of the watery solution of my body, and the target cell itself. Okay. So what steroid-based hormones do, and here's my steroid hormone, is because they're a lipid and because my cell membrane is made up of lipids, remember from Bio 1-2, the phospholipid bilayer. Because it's a lipid, these hormones can come straight into my cell, the target cell that it's meant to effect. And this is a good thing, it's meant to do this. So the steroid hormone comes straight into my cell and it goes straight into the nucleus, which is different than what's going to happen over here. And the thing that it reacts with is called an intracellular receptor. Intra, as in inside, into the intracellular receptor. So as you can see, here's my little hormone and it's hooking up, okay, with that receptor. And this piece of things is not super essential for you to memorize and remember, but what it then does is directs that cell to make some kind of protein. So throw back to Bio 1-2. You learned about transcription and translation, so making DNA into a copy of RNA, that's transcription, and then translation is taking that RNA piece and using a ribosome and eventually making a new protein. And so that's what this picture here is showing. A steroid-based hormone can go straight into the cell, its target cell, because it's a lipid, and it can directly influence DNA synthesis to make a protein. Right? It activates actual genes. So that's how it's different than my more common amino acid-based protein. So the amino acid-based protein, here's my target cell, the beige guy, and here's the outside of my cell. And here's my cell membrane, just like on the other one. And this guy is represented by a little triangle here. This is my AA hormone, amino acid hormone for short. Notice where this guy came straight into the nucleus, the amino acid hormone does not. It just attaches to this receptor on the outside. It's called an extracellular receptor. This was intra, this one's extra, as in outside of my cell, my target cell. So it does not go into my cell, but instead it starts this whole cascade of processes. It is not important that you know every step of this process. All I want you to know is that an amino acid hormone only attaches to the outside. It does not go in and it does not influence direct gene activation. Okay? So all the stuff, just to sum up all the craziness in here, is called like the CAMP process, and there's a complex and blah, blah, blah. You don't need to know that. But what it does is it causes an effect on the inside of the cell. So this little thing right here basically triggers a whole chain reaction. And then the cell says, oh, it's time for us to produce this hormone or some chemical reaction. So maybe it says to the pancreas, let's release insulin to break down more sugar or glucose in my body. And so this would be essentially the little receptors telling the pancreas to release the insulin. Okay? And so all of that effect would be happening on the inside. Okay? So just as a recap, my steroid-based hormones, they activate genes. Sorry, that'll move out of the way in a minute. And it's different because it moves directly into my target cell. Whereas my amino acid-based protein, it is going to activate or deactivate enzymes, but it does not go into the cell itself. Instead, it connects to a messenger on the outside of the cell membrane of my target cell. Okay, steroids go in, amino acids kind of like secret code knock on the door and tell your body what to do. Okay, so there are two main types of hormones that we produce. Okay, so they're either steroid-based or amino acid-based. That's the first thing I want you to know about hormones. The second thing is the picture below that we're going to go over. Now might be a good time to draw like a line underneath these last little things that we just wrote down, and because we're going to label each of these three little columns as well over here. So depending on what type of gland we're talking about, and if you look at page 2 of your notes packet, you'll see the hormone man and all of his little organs. We're going to go over those and all the glands that produce hormones for our endocrine system. We'll get into that in more detail. But just as a brief introduction, there are 3 main ways that our body releases hormones. Okay, so we have the hormonal stimulus, where one hormone tells another hormone to be released. We have the humoral stimulus. By the way, this one's the most common. Right? We have the humoral stimulus. Oh my goodness, these two words are stinking close to each other. It's like we just flip-flop some letters. What humor means, not like ha-ha, humor, this comes from kind of the Latin or Greek word for liquid. A lot of times Latins and Greeks referred to the humors of the body. They just mean like the liquids. So your blood, mucus and lymph and anything liquidy that your body produced, they called humors. And so the humoral stimulus is all about my blood stimulating a gland to release its hormone. So that's another way. And then the third way right here is neural. So my brain and spinal cord sending a signal out to tell a gland to release its hormone. So depending on what hormone and what gland we're talking about, it's going to be stimulated different ways. So hormonal, a hormone stimulating hormone. Humoral, blood stimulating hormone. And then neural, so nerve impulses or nerves stimulating a gland to release its hormones. So let's start off again here with hormonal, our most common. You are going to see that we have a lot of hormones that say like this hormone stimulates this gland to release its hormone. We oftentimes call that a cascade. Cascades, like even just waterfalls, like we have, the town of Cascade. But a cascade is something where like the smaller waterway becomes a larger waterway and it cascades into this. So a cascading system is think of like dominoes where this triggers this to trigger this. And so this is a cascade of hormones through my body. And I mentioned this last unit about the master gland and in the brain. So this is in the brain, right at the diencephalon, and we've got right here the hypothalamus. And attached to it right here is the pituitary gland, which we call the master gland. So the pituitary gland has an anterior and a posterior side. There's two halves to it. It kind of actually sort of looks like testicles a little bit dangling down. There's two lobes to it. The anterior pituitary is called the master gland because it releases a lot of different hormones that stimulate other glands to release their hormones. That's where it gets its name from. But it is triggered by the hypothalamus. In the hypothalamus, I have this word written right here. It's called a neuroendocrine, meaning it has a dual purpose. It partially lays in the nervous system and it has a role in my brain, but it also makes hormones and it has a role to play in my endocrine system. So it is an organ that is considered neuroendocrine. It's got its like feet in both worlds. And the reason why it is considered an endocrine gland is because it makes hormones. So this little piece of my brain right here, it makes hormones and it releases its hormone to stimulate my anterior pituitary through a little bloodstream. That's what we see here is a blood vessel. So this hormone, we're just going to call it the releasing hormone, and a hypothalamus releases the releasing hormone, and then my anterior pituitary releases its hormones. Eventually, but not today. It's important that you're going to learn the names of these, but for now, we're just going to use these as an example. So one hormone that the anterior pituitary releases is the thyroid stimulating hormone. I just abbreviated it for brevity's sake. And the thyroid stimulating hormone stimulates the thyroid, just as the name suggests. So this is my thyroid gland. We find it in the neck. We'll go over all those on Monday. And the thyroid stimulating hormone will tell the thyroid gland to release its hormones. So T3 and T4 are the names of its hormones. So this is what I mean when I say it's a cascade. Hypothalamus released releasing hormone to stimulate the anterior pituitary, to stimulate the thyroid, and then the thyroid released its hormones. You do not have to have that whole system memorized, but I just want you to see that this domino is knocking over this domino, knocking over this domino, a cascade. That's what it's called. It does other glands too. That's why it's the master gland. Okay, so the anterior pituitary also releases ACTH, adrenal corticotropic hormone. And as the name suggests, adrenal, it affects the adrenal glands. And these are the glands that sit right on top of your kidney. If you think of adrenaline, that's this gland. So it releases its hormones, cortisol and aldosterone. These two aren't as exciting as adrenaline. They just maintain kind of your blood pressure in your body. All right, and then a third, for example, hormone that it releases is called the luteinizing hormone, or LH. And luteinizing hormone tells the testes and ovaries in females to release their sex hormones. So the testes will then release its hormone, the testosterone, and other androgens. Androgens is just a general term we use for male sex hormones. So hormonal stimulus, one hormone stimulating other hormones to be released, okay? Cascade effect. All right, then let's move over to our humoral or blood stimulus. So just for, what are we looking at here? So notice that this guy and this guy look alike. We are looking at our thyroid gland right here. Now, if the thyroid gland sits kind of right here in the neck, if I were to take my thyroid out and turn it around so you can look at the back side, that's what we're looking at here. On the back side of my thyroid, there are 4 tiny little glands called the parathyroid glands. There's 4 of them. I wrote it out here, and I didn't write it out here for brevity's sake. But there's 4 of them, right? So not the thyroid. I'm not talking about the thyroid in this example, but just for a frame of reference here, I'm talking about parathyroid. There's 4 of them. So what happens in this blood stimulus, humoral stimulus, is that what I have a drop in calcium for whatever reason in my bloodstream. I haven't had enough to eat today, or my bones are absorbing more calcium because they're repairing themselves due to exercise, or maybe a fracture, whatever. I have low calcium in my bloodstream. So there's blood vessels feeding into these guys. And so as soon as they sense, oh, we have a drop in blood calcium, the parathyroid glands are going to release parathyroid hormone, PTH. And parathyroid hormone is going to increase my calcium in my bloodstream. And so it's a direct blood stimulates this hormone to release its hormone. Okay? That one's pretty simple. And then the neural as well is pretty simple. It's just a nerve impulse telling your hormones to release its gland. So we have here a section of my spinal cord, or my central nervous system, and I have a nerve, right, impulse getting sent to my gland right here. This is my adrenal gland. You can see it pictured here too. The adrenal gland is broken up into 2 sections. There's the outside, the cortex, which is what ACTH stimulates. But then on the inside of my adrenal gland, it is called the adrenal medulla. My little picture here, and it just means inside. But if you can see on this picture here, these nerve fibers are going directly into the inside of my adrenal gland. And so when that nerve impulse sends a signal to my adrenal gland to release its hormone, this is when blood, okay, into my bloodstream, I'm going to release my hormones, epinephrine and norepinephrine. These are your adrenaline. This is what we think of when we think of adrenaline. So we don't call it adrenaline, though. It's norepinephrine and epinephrine. Or if you ever have a friend, or you maybe have an EpiPen, this is what's in an EpiPen. So this is your fight or flight response. If we were in class, I would ask you to respond here. That think about, why would these fight or flight hormones be connected to my nervous system as opposed to waiting on another hormone to stimulate another hormone to stimulate another hormone? Think about that for a second. Why would I want my fight or flight to be connected to my nervous system and not to other hormones? If you're thinking speed, you are correct. Right? If I need to jump out of the way of a moving car, I need to do that immediately. And my nervous system is way faster than my endocrine system is. So you have, and there's not a ton of room, and I'm sorry for this, but you've got a wee bit of space next to your picture here, okay? So you're gonna add this next little bit to that. So in this little section right here. So I want to talk about, oh, here, sorry, this is in the way. All right, so for each of these, I want to go over, like, summing it up, okay? So the hormonal stimulus, you can see there at the bottom, this is when a hormone causes the release of other hormones. I described it as a cascade. It's also considered tropic hormones. You can even see that in this name, ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone. Tropic just means hormone stimulating other hormones, and that's the hormonal stimulus. Humoral stimulus is when the blood is going to stimulate it. So this is the hormone release caused by altered levels of very important ions, so critical ions, or nutrients. So maybe a decrease in glucose could stimulate this. And this is in my humors, my blood, my liquids. And then lastly, neural, right? This is going to be where your nerve impulses are going to stimulate the release of hormones. So hormone release by neural input. Okay, so those little things at the bottom are just summing up each of these pictures for you. It'll be helpful for your homework. Okay, so what I was getting to here is that this is way faster than this, okay? Direct nerve impulse sending a signal to my body as opposed to waiting for other hormones to stimulate other hormones to stimulate other hormones. And that's because my nervous system acts faster. Now, as we go through this entire unit, one thing we're going to rely heavily on is negative feedback. And if you can remember negative feedback from very, very beginning of this school year, our negative feedback is, think of like a temperature thermometer in your house, okay? So you've got your dial that determines the temperature of your home. I don't know, ours is at like what, 65, okay? So it's a little rainy today. If it gets colder than 65, my heater's gonna kick on. Now it won't stay on all day long. It's just gonna stay on long enough to bring it back up to 65, and then it'll shut itself off. Negative feedback, remember, is when, let's say blood glucose. I have a set level of what my blood glucose should be. I drop below that glucose level, my body's gonna do everything it can to raise it back up. Once I get back up, or maybe just a little above my set point, it's going to shut the system off. And then eventually my blood glucose might drop again, and then it'll kick back on and raise it back up. Negative feedback just responds to when you're off the mark, right? Is what negative feedback is. So most of my endocrine system relies on that. So here was a good example. My set point for calcium is here. I drop below my calcium levels, so parathyroid hormone brings my calcium levels back up, and it's going to shut off again. So negative feedback is what my entire endocrine system relies on. So we have two main ways that we can control our body. Basically our last unit and our current unit, okay, how we control our body. So the nervous system controls our body. It is fast, way, way faster than the endocrine system. And it uses these electrochemical impulses, an action potential, right? Using these ions to send signals. Got a crying dog over there. The endocrine system, on the other hand, is slower to react. It is not as fast. However, it controls a lot of your body chemistry, the metabolic activity. Metabolism is your chemistry of your body, how quickly you can break down or increase substances. So it's doing that using hormones. And the other benefit of your endocrine system is its effects last much longer than those of our nervous system. All right, I know this page has a ton of stuff filled out on it now, but you should be able to successfully do your homework assignment, and you can edit your original assignment. So if you get anything wrong, don't close your tab, just click on edit your response, and you can go back and just change those answers that you maybe got incorrect. All right, I hope you guys stay dry and warm on this rainy spring Friday, and I hope you have a great weekend. Looking at kind of our schedule, we have about 2 weeks or a week and a half for our endocrine system. And then we'll start reviewing and working towards your final. We will be doing your final a week early. That week where we have Memorial Day weekend, that Monday off, I'll give you guys your basically option. You have 2 days to take your final, the 26th and 27th. I may have it posted earlier. I'm not positive yet, but you can even use the long weekend to take your final. So we're nearing the end, but one more unit to get through. Endocrine system, this guy's kind of short and sweet, just hormones and what they do. All right, have an awesome day. Message me, email me, do whatever you need to do to get in touch if you have any questions. And I hope you are well, and I sure miss you guys.